All right, before you take notes today, you need to go into the classroom or classwork and print this thing out. This will help. And on the back, we're going to do some notes down here. We're going to just connect everything we've done on that circle, the special triangles 45, 45, 90, 30, 60, 90, and we're going to put this this important information on the unit circle and come up with ordered pairs. We've already done degrees, we've done radians. Now we're going to do the ordered pairs. If you take a look back at this 45, 45, 90, these are both legs and they're the same length because the angles across from them are the same. The hypotenuse is equal to the leg times the square root of 2. That's not new. We've done that before. The 30, 60, 90, we have a short leg, we got a long leg, and we got a hypotenuse, and we know that the hypotenuse is 2 times the short leg, and the long leg is the short leg times the square root of 3. So what we're going to try and do is put this information on what we call the unit circle. The unit circle is just a circle with radius of 1. So if we draw that 45, 45, 90 triangle on the unit circle, we'll just put it in any quadrant. I'm going to put it in quadrant 1. And the unit circle, the radius is 1. But if we use the information from up here, the hypotenuse is equal to the leg times the square root of 2, we can come up with some really, really important stuff for our unit circle. So leg times the square root of 2. But I know in the unit circle the hypotenuse is 1. So if I replace hypotenuse with 1 and I solve for the leg, I would divide by the square root of 2. So the leg is equal to 1 over the square root of 2. And in an earlier lesson we learned you can't have that radical in the bottom. So I multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of 2, and I get the leg is equal to the square root of 2 over 2. So that means the x and the y are both square root of 2 over 2. So that means this ordered pair right here, the x is square root of 2 over 2, and the y is square root of 2 over 2. And the great thing about this is I can put this triangle in quadrant 2, I can put it in quadrant 3, I can put it in quadrant 4, and I'm going to use these same values, but I'm going to do something with their signs when I put them in there. Now if you look at the 30, 60, 90, over here, remember that the hypotenuse is 2 times the short leg, but this is the unit circle, so the hypotenuse is 1. So if we write that down, the hypotenuse is equal to 2 times the short leg, and I replace the hypotenuse with 1, I can solve this for short leg by dividing by 2, and the short leg is going to equal 1/2. Now our short leg is this y over here. Okay, the y value is 1/2. Now what is the x value? The x value in this one, because it's across from the 60, represents the long leg, and if you look back at our definition here, our equation, the long leg is equal to the short leg times the square root of 3. So long equals short times the square root of 3. But I know that the short is 1/2 in the unit circle. I always like to write this as the square root of 3 over 2. And the long leg in this picture is the x. So this ordered pair right here is the x, square root of 3 over 2, and the y is 1/2. Right, but here's another thing that we learned, that the sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Well, if that's true, the sine is going to equal the y over 1, which is just y. So the y value on these ordered pairs, is your sine. And your cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent side is the x over 1, so the cosine would be the x. So the cosine is the x, and the sine is the y, and that's true over here too, cosine, sine. So I could ask you, what is the sine of 30 degrees? Sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. But this 30, 60, 90 right triangle could be written like this. Okay, now the long leg is the y. So So the long leg is the long leg of this 3060 down here. The x down here becomes the y here. So this ordered pair, I'm just going to reverse that order. So it's 1/2 square root of 3 over 2. Again, this is the cosine, this is the sine. So if this angle right here is a 60-degree angle, the cosine of 60 is 1/2. The sine of 60, square root 3 over 2. And I can use those 3 ordered pairs from quadrant 1, and I can fill out the entire unit circle. I'll show you how to do that in a second. So let's go on this side. Hopefully you already filled this out. And what I want to do first is just fill out all these degrees. This is 0, and I like to start with all the multiples of 30. So this one's 30. 30 times 2 is 60. 30 times 3 is 90. Times 4 is 120. Times 5 is 150. Times 6 is 180. Times 7 is 210. Times 8 is 240. Times 9 is 270. Times 10 is 300. Times 11 is 330. Times 12, this is also 360 degrees. All right, the only ones that are missing are these ones right in the middle, which are, it cuts that right angle in half. So this is 45 times 1, 45 times 2, 45 times 3. You can use your calculator. 45 times 4, 45 times 5, 45 times 6, 45 times 7, and then 45 times 8, you're back to 360. And then the next thing I want to do is go ahead and fill in my radians. This is 0 radians or 2 pi radians. We'll get back to that in a minute. And the first one, and if you don't remember, 30 degrees times pi over 180, we'll convert it to radians. 30 goes into 186 times, so this would be pi over 6. So this is, again, this is just from that other lesson. We did the same thing before. So I'm going to look at multiples of 30 or multiples of pi over 6. 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6. I'm just reducing. 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, 6 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6, 8 pi over 6, and I'm just reducing them, 9 pi over 6, 10 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6, and 12 pi over 6 is 2 pi. The other ones are the ones in the middle. They're 45 degrees. And I can do the same thing. What is that in radians? And if you do that correctly, you will get pi over 4. 1 pi over 4. So I'm going every 45 degrees. 45, 45. 2 pi over 4. 3 pi over 4. 4 pi over 4. 5 pi over 4. 6 pi over 4. 7 pi over 4. And 8 pi over 4, we're back to 2 pi. All right, so that's degrees and radians. Now, if you remember from the other side, this 30, 60, 90 right triangle, the long side, my x, the long side was the square root of 3 over 2. So my x value, the ordered pair at this point right here, is square root of 3 over 2. My short side, which is the y, was 1/2. All right, now the 30, 60, 90 is also right up here, so just reverse these two because the long side now becomes the y side and the short side is the x. So you just reverse them. And if you look at the 45, 45, 90, the legs, both legs were the same. So the x and the y are both the same. The square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2. And remember, the cosine is your x, sine is your y. Easy way to remember that is alphabetical order. Now we should have started here at these. If you remember, these are multiples of 90 are called the quadrantal angles. Well, if the unit circle has a radius of 1, from this point to this point, your x is 1, your y is 0. From this point to this point, your x is 0, your y is 1. I like to label those cosine, sine. So my x, I'm going in this direction, is -1. My y is 0. And this one, I'm not moving in the x direction. Should have been an ordered pair there. 0, -1. And then we're back to 1, 0. Now, if you can learn these 3 ordered pairs, you can fill out this entire unit circle. And I'll show you how in a second. This is quadrant 1. Every ordered pair in quadrant 1 is positive, positive. Quadrant 2, every ordered pair is negative, positive. In quadrant 3, every ordered pair is negative, negative. To get to quadrant 3, you got to go left and down. So your x is negative, your y is negative. And here in quadrant 4, you're going to the right, your x is positive. You're going down, your y is negative. So remember, every x is your cosine, every y is your sine. And you'll notice that your cosine is positive in 2 quadrants. Quadrant 1, quadrant 4. Sine is positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. They're both negative in quadrant 3, both of them. Okay? Here's one thing, if you notice this is going to help the rest of the time we do trig. The angles that are closest to the x-axis, I'm talking about these right here. These 4 angles right here. All of them are closest to the x-axis. Notice in the radians, they're all over 6. All of them. Okay? So all of these are related. All of them are going to use this ordered pair exactly. Well, I shouldn't say exactly. It's just the sign's going to change. Over here in quadrant 2, this 150-degree angle is similar to this one. It gives me a 30, 60, 90 right triangle, where the short side is your y and your long side is your x. I just take this ordered pair, put it over here, but change the x to negative, keep the y positive. Down here, I make both of them negative. Use the same exact ordered pair as this one right here, the angle that's closest to the x-axis. So this one down here, now my cosine is positive, my sine is negative. So positive square root of 3 over 2, negative 1/2. And that works for every single one. Notice the one that's right in the middle. The one right in the middle. Every single radian has a 4 on the bottom. Every single one. So I take this ordered pair and I put it here, change the x to negative, put it here, change the x and y to negative, change it here, change the y to negative. So I take this ordered pair, same exact ordered pair, and I put it over here. But I change the x, keep the y the same. Change the x and the y, they're both negative, and here the x stays positive, the y changes to negative. And then the last ones are the ones farthest from the x-axis that are not quadrantal angles, and every single one of them has a 3 on the bottom in the radian measure. Every single one. So I'm going to take that ordered pair, I'm going to put it over here, but I'm going to make the x negative. So negative 1/2 square root of 3 over 2. Negative 1/2 negative square root of 3 over 2, because they're both negative in quadrant 3. Quadrant 4, the x is positive, the y is negative, and you'll see every single ordered pair is now finished. Now I can ask nice simple questions if you fill this out. What is the cosine of 120 degrees? Negative 1/2. What is the sine of 135? Square root 2 over 2. Right, hopefully that helps. Bye. Have a nice day.